Hey,
what's
we're
going
back, man. Hey, appreciate everybody pulling up, man. We're a little bit late today, but we have a fun show today. We're gonna have a great guest come on in a little bit. But yeah, man. Hey, Ray, what's up, man? How you doing?
What's going on, Farrell? There's a lot to talk about, and I'm excited for our guest today. I just anytime you can get a fresh perspective, we're 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. There's a lot that's going to go down, but to get somebody else's perspective, to see where the Raiders are going to go, whether at 7 or trade back, and we'll get into that discussion. But to be honest, I'm fired up for the conversation.
Facts. And let's we
Just
got some
address
people in
the
the
chat a little
chat.
bit.
Let's address the chat real quick before we bring our guests on.
Steve Jones says Zeus and Josh, awesome twosome. Let's not even go there. Richard Lyon, salute everyone. Need a cover linebacker for Kelsey. Facts. You like that little segue? Draft all the defensive tackle, linebacker, and corner. We're going to talk about that. And if we do get players for Graham's scheme, who says it'll work? Wow, there's a lot of negativity going on. GM Walt in the house. I appreciate you pulling up, Walt. Sean Johnson, salute Raider Ray in the panel. Steve Jones. All right. Let's just get straight into it, man. I want to introduce our guests. I don't want to leave them waiting. We've got a lot to talk about. Without further ado, everybody, Raider Nation, welcome Beast Rider.
Hey, what's going on, man? Raiders beat writer. This guy, hey, he knows his stuff. I was on the show the other day, man. Y'all need to check that out, especially because some good info that was being talked about. But what's up, man? How you doing?
Good, man. Just another day. No off seasons for me. So it's crazy because talking to you, hopping on at 1 p.m. I didn't even know it was supposed to be 1 p.m. even though I told you it was 1 p.m. That's where my headspace is at. It's like every day, it may be a new day to most people, but it's just one long day for me until the draft is over. It's just like constant grind watching film, bro. So it's I didn't go to sleep till 4:30 a.m. This morning. And so that's why I had bags under my eyes. I literally just woke up at 12. Yeah. So I'm just kind of still waking up.
Yes. Hey, well, I didn't get to have a conversation with you. Unfortunately, I was extremely busy that night, but hopefully moving forward, we can have those. But tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a bit how you got maybe into, being a beat writer and covering the Raiders, maybe what your perspectives are, and just tell Raider Nation a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so born and raised in San Jose, started a 49ers website called NinerFans.com, and then back in 2013 was named by NBC Bay Area News as a top area blogger. Just kind of exploded from there. From there, became a beat writer for the 49ers from that point on. And once COVID hit, obviously things kind of died down. And as you guys know, if anyone who lives in the Bay Area, it's not cheap. So people were asking me, why did I switch to the Raider Nation? Why did I switch to going to Las Vegas? And I said, as cool as it is to stay in the Bay Area, and Farrell knows because he lives in the Bay Area, it's very expensive. And like if I'm looking at it and checking my ego at the door, I'm looking at this saying, hey, look, financially, if I want to have a kid or if I want to have a family, right, like that has to play a role in my long-term gains, right? And so like the instant gratification of being here, it's just not feasible for me to live in the Bay Area. So I said, okay, so I still want to stay on the beat, right? So like what team can I cover? And that's where the Las Vegas Raiders came into play. I was like, you know what? Because I do cover all 32 NFL teams when it comes to mock drafts, when it comes to my grading system. And so there's no drop off in production covering and moving on from the 49ers to the Raiders or the Raiders to the Steelers or the Steelers to the Cardinals. So it was one of those things where I said to myself, what's close enough to the Bay Area for an NFL team that I can cover and still have a passion for covering that respective team? Because I'll be honest with you, the Raider Nation is the most loyal fan base in the entire NFL. And I said that even when I was a 49ers beat writer, and 49ers fans hated that I said that. They called me, I was like, no, man, I'm just keeping 100, right? Like the Raiders can suck and the nation will still have their back. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
if the Niners
makes a lot of sense.
If the Niners suck, everyone's like, oh, like I'm a Cowboy fan now, or I'm a whatever. You know what I mean? Like, come on, let's keep it 100. Like,
hey,
more times than not, there are
shots fired.
They're all faithful Niner fans. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of faithful Niner fans. I'm not saying the fan base as a whole, but come on. If you were to say if there's one loyal fan base in the entire NFL, it'd be the Raider Nation. And that's what gravitated me toward the Raider Nation, simply because moving from and to the dark side, that's why I named my company Dark Side of Beast Rider, is it's not as simple as playing cut as going from one team to the next. You're actually going to a rival. and going to a rival, that's just all good vibes. That's what I call dark side vibes, and I love it because when people tell me I can't do something, I'm going to prove you wrong.
I know Raider Nation was like, wait. Did you say you're coming from the 49ers?
Yeah.
But hey, at the end of the day, this guy puts in a lot of work, man. This guy knows his stuff. I was on a show the other day, man. I could just tell, just being on the show, the amount of information that he knows. He breaks down film. He breaks down college prospects. He breaks down the Raiders roster. And that's at the end of the day, for me, that's what I want. That's at the end of the day, I want someone who knows their stuff when it comes to, our team, the Raiders, and that is on point. And that's what the Beast Rider offers. So you want to make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the like button, do all that good stuff. The notification bell is also important too, so you guys can be notified when he drops that fire content.
Now, that was a good introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the state of the Raiders. Let's talk about the roster, okay? The direction. We obviously have the draft coming up, and there's going to be a lot of decisions to make. So, specifically, where the Raiders roster stands, what is your perspective, and how do you feel about it?
I'll be honest with you. Like, people are on the fence on whether this is a rebuild or a retool. Farrell and me talked about it. He asked me the question. I think, to be honest with you, it's a rebuild. And the reason I say that is because they are not one. No, I hope I'm wrong, right? Like, I'm not here to say they can't get it done. But I hope they get it done. I mean, I like the guys personally, but if I'm just being real, and from my analysis and my perspective, when you look around the landscape of the other 31 other NFL teams, they're just a step behind. And it has nothing to do with the coaching staff as much as it has to do with the player talent that they have right now, which is why if you look at the players that they brought in, I think they're trying to speed up that process, right? They're getting guys who are familiar with the offense. They're getting guys who actually know the system, who actually know the cultural identity of the team. There's no drop off in production from that standpoint, because when you go into offseason OTAs and rookie minicamp and all that other stuff, you don't have time to window shop and teach these guys, hey, you have to get up to speed. Because let's face it, if they have another year like this, everybody's on the hot seat. Like, everybody's going to be saying, you know what I mean? Like, so from their perspective, they're saying this, hey, look, we're already on the hot seat, so let's not make it hotter. Let's get guys that we know that we can trust, right? When we get them into the game, they know what to do and how to do it. And then they can also be an extra coach on the football field. That's something that no one really talks about. Jakobi Meyers can be an extra coaching, bring an extra coaching perspective from a player's perspective. Same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. Same thing with, the same dynamic that they tried to do last year with Chandler Jones, Duron Harmon, guys who brought the Patriot way to the Raider way. And you see it with Brandon Bolt. You know what I mean? So the list of how they're doing things is the right way. But to think that the Raiders are going to go to the playoffs, I hope they do. Like I said, I hope they do. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't think that they don't have enough defensive keys on defense to go ahead and make that play. Right. My opinion.
No, I agree. But you made an interesting point about Josh McDaniels being on the hot seat. When you look at Mark Davis, I feel like, whether you talk about the GM with Reggie McKenzie, giving Reggie McKenzie a ton of time, which he did, and he gave Jack Del Rio time until Gruden became available and became his guy. Then boom, he throws him a 10-year contract. Mark Davis has given his guys time. So even if the Raiders went out there and won 7 games this year, do you really think that Josh McDaniels is potentially on the hot seat, or do you think that Mark is going to give him an enormous amount of time to get this thing right and build it in his image, much like he was trying to do with John Gruden?
I think he's going to get more time, because I think if you wipe your hands clean after 2 years of work, I don't think that's enough sample size to pull from to actually say, hey, Coach McDaniels we made the wrong decision by hiring Coach McDaniels. Right. In my opinion, I think Coach McDaniels is a top 5 head coach in the entire NFL. I mean, that's just my thinking. Wow. And for me to go out and say that, I'm saying that because I've seen it with the 49ers. I've seen it with Kyle Shanahan. It's the same dynamic that happened in 2017 when Jimmy Garoppolo was traded. The same dynamic I see with the Raiders roster currently. So I see the coaching points. I see the teaching points. I see how the culture identity that they're trying to build up is the winning culture. Now, again, players play and coaches coach. It's up to the players to get it done, up to the coaches to put the players in the right position to make plays. So you can't just pinpoint that's the reason why we're losing is because XYZ. I mean, people blame Coach McDaniels for the play calling, but at the end of the day, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the first time in one of 5 times in NFL history that Devontae Adams, a wide receiver and a running back, went over 1,500 yards in the same season. So when you have that type of dynamic, and then you peel back layers of the onion to really get to the core and say exactly what's the why behind why you're saying that Coach McDaniels is bad, you really have to do your due diligence. Because let's be honest about this. The year prior to last year, they made it to the playoffs barely because they were squeaking out wins late in the season. Just because the ball didn't flip the switch the other way around last year in 2022 doesn't make it a team that was, the wheels are off the wagon. No, it's just the ball fell the opposite direction. That's just the way the NFL works sometimes. Not making excuses, but it is what it is, right? And so I think people have to take it with a grain of salt when you look at the Raider Nation and say, hey, look, as bad as the season has gone, was it really as bad as people make it out to seem? Because every fan base is going to have that objective mindset to say, hey, look, we didn't make the playoffs, so it's a lost season. But then look at what they had and look at the landscape. Again, it goes back to covering the other 31 other NFL teams. Look at what they did and the talent that they had. And so you look at the financial snapshot of it, it really doesn't make sense for you to kind of put that on Coach McDaniels, solely on Coach McDaniels or GM Dave Ziegler, because at the end of the day, look, they brought in guys like Davante Adams. They solidified the interior defense by drafting guys that they thought in the powerhouse SEC were going to be key clogs, right? Like Neil Farrell and Matthew Butler. We still don't know what's going to happen with those guys. I'm still very high on those guys. I know they're high on those guys. So again, just give them some time. And then I think after year 3 is when we can really say, hey man, I think it's time, but give them at least 3 years.
Wow, that's interesting. You called him a top 5 head coach.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and a lot of Raider fans too as well, they are kind of looking at McDaniels and they're not sure if they can trust him because at the end of the day, as a head coach, he hasn't had much success. His only head coaching stop with Denver, that didn't go well. And then obviously the way the Raiders lost this season, I know some of them were close games, but even the fact that they were up, things that never have been done before has happened with the Raiders last season, as far as being up, I think at least 17 or 21-0. I forgot the score, but they lost multiple games with large leads. And I think that has McDaniels in Raider Nation minds on the hot seat. But what you're saying, the clock doesn't start until last season doesn't really count.
No,
because he was coaching, he wasn't coaching his players.
He wasn't coaching his players. GM Dave Ziegler wasn't bringing in his guys. He had to trade Tyree Gillespie. He had to trade who else? Jonathan Abram. He wiped his hands clean of the 2019 draft class, right? Outside of Josh Jacobs, Mascot. You know what I mean? So when you really look at it for what it really is, if I'm a GM, I would do the same exact thing, but it's unfair to criticize a regime who's trying to do their things their way, because they're only as good as the cards they were dealt. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're dealt a crappy hand in a game of Texas Hold'em and you're that's just, you can't change. Hey, dealer, I got crappy cards, man. Can I get a new set of cards? No, that's what you're dealt. So now you just have to work with what you have. Bluff, raise, or fold, right? So it's one of those things where I think it's unfair. And the reason I say that is not being I never take a homer take, right? I never take a homer take if you know me. Right. I always keep an honest take, a fair take. The fair take is it's not fair because if you were put in that situation, how well would you do?
Yeah, that's true. That makes sense. I mean, if obviously, because usually that first year, and we've seen that even with John Gruden, his first year, he traded away Khalil Mack. He traded away Amari Cooper. That first season with the Raiders was 4-12. So I understand that logic, but I also, I hear former players like Brandon Marshall say the things that he's saying, that he's not a leader of men. He has everything that he says. He said this. He said he has everything, but he's not a leader of men. Do you agree with those comments? Do you feel like?
I already fired back on that one. That's total BS, man. Because I'm in that locker room. I know. I talk to the players. I'm friends with a lot of the players. Trust me. Like Brandon Marshall's not there. He doesn't know what's going on. Whatever dynamic he had in Denver or whatever beef that he had with Coach McDaniels, possibly for him to come out and say that. What are you saying? Now let's keep it 100 now, right? It's easy for him to say that now.
Yeah.
And if the script flips, is he going to go out and say that, or is he going to apologize and go on inside the NFL and say, I'm sorry, right? I was wrong. it's really hard for someone who's not even inside the building. I never seen Brandon Marshall once, by the way. So he may know people, he may talk to people. I'm sure he does, right? But he's not there.
Mm.
I'm there. So who would you rather trust? Someone who's there or someone who's not there?
That's true.
As their 9 to 5. Let's keep them 100.
That's true. That's true.
And I don't get paid by the Raiders. They don't tell me what to say. I'm independent.
And there's some truth to what you're saying too, because he might have a personal vendetta against McDaniels because he was traded away from Denver.
Yeah.
And depending on how that and I've listened to his podcast, shout out to them, I Am Athlete or whatever. And he said he's kind of said that, he's got into it with that coaching staff and the McDaniels, and eventually it led to him getting traded. But it's interesting when you hear players, and he's not the only one that had said it. But you make a good point. I do trust the people who are there all the time, who see the everyday, who see the coaching staff, who see the players all the time. Because in my opinion, I trust the beat writers more than the national writers.
Man, preach. And here's another thing. All right. I talked to Josh Jacobs about that. Me and Josh Jacobs get along really well. So I talked to Josh Jacobs about it. I say, hey, man, you play for John Gruden. You also play for Coach McDaniels. Can you talk about the difference? He said John Gruden was a good one, but Coach McDaniels is a great one in terms of offensive play calling, knowing the nuances of the game. I mean, he doesn't have to say that. He doesn't have to say it. Now you can be coached up to what to say to people like us so we can go out and put out goodwill. But that was very authentic. There was no reason for him to say that. Josh Jacobs had his best season under who? Coach McDaniels. Come on, let's keep it on. Devontae Adams had a really good year, right? Derek Carr struggled, right? But is Derek Carr the reason why they lost? No, it was a whole myriad of things because the offensive line on the right side wasn't as strong as people make it out to seem. Let's just keep him 100. I just keep it. Look at it for what it really is. Again, compare the team you're rooting for, you're covering to the landscape of the other 31. Look at what they're doing. Look how much success or non-success they had, and then get back to me on whether or not they had a lost season or is as bad as people make it out to seem.
And you can make the argument the team that Josh McDaniels inherited, it came off a 10-7 season. But was that team really a 10-7 football team? If that were to happen 5 times in a row, right? Yeah. Is that team really a 10-7 football team? To me, you alluded to it earlier. The ball rolled in the favor that season for the Raiders quite a bit, and they were able. Kudos to the Raiders staff and Rich Bisaccia for being able to go out there and pull together, the tragic loss with Henry Ruggs and John Gruden, everything that season entailed. And they were able to go out there and make a postseason appearance. But let's be honest, like that roster was not that great.
Right.
And they inherited a team, and now, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I feel like this season is going to be the season where you actually feel a real culture change in Las Vegas. This is going to be the time where you see, okay, these are guys that Dave Ziegler, Josh McDaniels really want, and you're going to get a preview of the direction that this team is actually heading in, as to where last season it felt like a blend between two teams, right? You got a few hand-selected players that knew the system, but then you have a bit of the old regime. So do you feel like this is going to be that first year where you really start to see the direction that the Raiders are wanting to head?
Yeah, and it's something that I've always was a firm believer in. Being a beat writer with the Niners so many years and getting to know people around NFL circles, talking to current GMs and stuff. One thing that I learned from them is the most significant, and I talked about the Coach Belichick, the most significant year for a player's growth is going from year 1 to year 2. Same thing applies with a new coaching regime or anytime there's a new cultural identity in place. You can't really judge off that 1 year body of work. It's just really unfair. I mean, few are Jim Harbaughs that come into, 2011 and just shoot up and then go up to the championship game 3 straight consecutive. I mean, that rarely happens. But you see the dynamic of what you said, Raider Ray, is I think you're going to see that because it's just like any company that you work for, right? The first year is just a trial, right? It's tribulations, it's trial, it's facing adversity, whatever. The second year is, okay, we already kind of know how to handle the situation because we had it in year 1. So you don't know what you're getting into year 1. You just know you're getting the unknown and you're just kind of being thrown into the fire. Year 2 is when, hey, look, we've been thrown into the fire. Now let's put out the fire.
No, I like it. Hey, give us the temperature and the gauge of the locker room as a whole. You're a guy whose feet are in there. You talk to the players. You know, you get to get in front of these guys.
Mhm.
Do you feel like this is a locker room that's all in with this regime? Is there any type of split? Give us your take on that.
I think, again, goes back to the first year, right? I think there are players that didn't buy in. I'll just keep it 100. There's players that didn't buy into the program because they were losing, right? When you don't win, you're not going to buy into it because you're not winning. So obviously you have to change something. In their minds, they have to change something because they're not winning. I would say 85% of the players that I spoke with bought in. And though, to be honest with you, the 85% are the ones that you probably should care about. You shouldn't care about the 15% because they're no longer with the team anymore, or they're on the fence this year about making the team. No, I'm just not trying to throw shade. I'm just keeping it 100. So, like I say, you talk to the Devontae Adams, you talk to the Josh Jacobs, you talk to the Max Crosby, right? I mean, you're talking to all the cornerstone players of the franchise. They will all tell you that everyone's buying in. Everyone is accountable for their own actions. You know, year one was not the season that, you know, I can already see the narrative, right? People are going to be asking them, oh, you know, what's the difference from year one to year two now that you're in the system for, oh, you know, it's a lot different and more familiar. You know, last year was a disappointment. You know, we already know what they're going to say, right? So at the end of the day, I think the pulse of the locker room, and again, I'm there Monday through Friday, right? And then on game days on Sunday. So I can tell you firsthand, like, look, I don't know who put out like the players aren't buying in, because the players that I spoke with said they're buying in. So I'll just leave it at that. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Everyone has their own sources. I like to believe my sources are pretty freaking strong.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it happened. Yeah, it definitely happens when you're losing. When the team's losing and it's not going, you know, people will probably put out stuff to make it more interesting. You know, especially with the Raiders, we've always had dysfunction. I know you're new to covering the team, but I'm sure from the outside looking in, you've heard all types of things when it came to Raiders. And I just felt like it was, I guess it's believable when something is going left with the Raiders. It's so believable. We can believe like there's dysfunction in the locker room with the Raiders because they've had that so many times in the past. You know, the Raiders haven't been winning for a long time. So you know, I hope that McDaniels is a top 5 head coach. I hope he's going to go down as one of the greatest head coaches of all time. I'm a bigger Dave Z guy. You know, because when you hear Dave Z talk, like he just makes so much sense. And now it's go time. It's the draft is coming up. This is what he's been hired to do. And if he can go and he can get some starters out this draft and build a nucleus for the future, man, it's going to quiet down a lot of that noise that's coming from Raider Nation that's, you know, talking about, oh, we might need to get new guys in the building. But it's good to hear from like, you know, someone that's in the building and sees things every day, and you're letting us know that, hey, that's not the case.
Yeah, and like again, I know I'm new to the nation, but I don't sugarcoat anything. I watch a lot of film. Speaking of Dave Ziegler, he actually loves my film study. Brandon Yergin, the director of college scouting, says, you know, no one puts in the work like you do. I love the way, keep up the film work, keep up the great work. Training camp, the one-on-one drills. I mean, that's where GM Dave Ziegler really caught it. He actually made it a point and said, hey man, keep up with what you're doing. The one-on-ones. I like it.
Right.
That's how I got introduced to him. He's like, hey, you're Ryan, right? Coming out of a press conference. I said, yeah. He's like, oh, I saw your one-on-one. Keep it up. So hearing words like that really means a lot. Not trying to toot my own horn, but just to tell the nation, like, look, I'll keep it fair. You know what I mean? Like if a player's not doing well, I'm going to point it out in training camp. It could be, just not speaking out loud, but just, I don't know. Like if Max Crosby had a bad rep, I'm going to call it out. Like he had a bad rep, okay, cool. Like 1 out of 99 that he had a bad rep. Who cares? Right. But I'm going to call it out. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything.
That's how you build credibility.
That's how you build credibility. And so like, I think one thing that I'm not afraid to do is tell it like it is. Players understand that too. But you say it in a respectful way, right? Like, I can't do it. Like, there's no way I can do it. Like, I'm only 5'5", bro. I'm a midget. So like, I can't do it. But it's my job to project and predict, right? And so it's the player's job to perform. And at the end of the day, if I'm being fair in my analysis and reporting, again, what Pharaoh and Ray, what you're saying is, it's all about credibility. Credibility to me is all about getting it right in real time and not being what I like to call a triple F, a flip, flop, or fake. Going from real-time analysis and then cross-checking in hindsight and then flipping your take. I always take a stance, and I take a hard stance, and more times than not, I am right. And the reason why I'm right is because I think I watch a lot of game film, and I've been known to watch game film, and that's what I've been known for.
And that's a perfect segue. Make sure everybody is subscribed to his YouTube channel. You can find him at BeastRider down on the ticker below. Make sure you follow him on Twitter and on Instagram. Guys, let's transition to the draft. I mean, this is what we're here for. This is what we're here to talk about. I'm extremely intrigued to get your opinion on quite a bit of stuff. So for me and Pharaoh go live, every week, and we've been talking about the draft for weeks now. And to me, in my perspective, just looking at the history of Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, the small sample size that we have, the whole hot narrative is Raiders are going to take 12 defensive players, are going to draft 12 picks all defensively. And that has not been what we've been saying at all. Matter of fact, I see them still addressing offensive guard, potential of future center. You were talking about the right side, maybe going out there getting a tackle. You could honestly go get another tight end. I mean, there's all levels that this roster could use talent. What is your perspective of the narrative that the Raiders are going to go out and resource 12 draft picks to the defense and maybe kind of put a nail in the coffin for that situation?
Unfollow everyone who said that. Unfollow them. Don't waste your time.
I love it. Shots fired.
Don't waste your time. And the reason I say that is because they don't know the landscape of how NFL drafts are formulated. I've been covering the draft since 1998. Okay. Again, not trying to toot my own horn, just giving you guys the lowdown or people who don't know what I'm about, exactly what it is, right? I keep it 100, keep it unfiltered. So let's just go. 12 draft. How many years since 1970 has 12 draft picks been made?
Not a lot, because it's not going to happen.
Okay, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So, no, watch it happen. This guy sucks. He's wrong.
Yep.
Look, I think I already run on record, said this on Raider Nation Radio, the Raiders official podcast. I said, one, they're not going to make 12 draft picks because that's not GM Dave Ziegler's MO. He doesn't do that. What he does and what he likes to do is see value in the mid to later rounds and maneuver the board how he sees fit. That's number one. Number two, I already said that they're going to make 2 or 3 draft day trades, moving up, moving down, stockpiling more picks for 2024. Because it's not like he's going to lose his job after this upcoming season, right? His job is safe. So when you do that and you leverage future draft capital in future years, now you're comparing the valuation versus evaluation versus instant gratification versus the long-term gains. Then you peel back another layer of that and say, okay, look, based on how I see the draft board falling, because I've been covering the draft for many years, beating all the ESPN mocks, all the NFL Network mocks, beat them all, right? Over the last 3 years, finished no worse than third over the last 8. So when you look at that and you look at the teams that are drafting, my thinking is, and again, I said on Raider Nation Radio, I said they're going to trade back from 7 into the cluster of the 10 to 18 range and stockpile more picks. Then what they're going to do is now they're going to have so many draft picks. There's going to in the 28 to 32 range. See, I'm breaking it down to the exact pick range. 28 to 32, they're going to trade back up into the first round, get a tier 2 player that otherwise wouldn't be available when they're on the clock in the first half of round 2. And that could be a quarterback like Hendon Hooker. That could be someone else. But I literally think after the end of day 1, they're going to end up with multiple day 1 picks. And on top of that, don't be surprised if they went ahead and drafted Peter Skoronski. Like I said, I like Peter Skoronski, graded his film. People say he has short arms. He does. That gives him problems. But I see a Pro Bowl offensive guard. And if you can get that type of player in that 12 to 15 range while still picking up another draft pick in the process, now you're really building the foundational culture of what you're trying to establish for Jimmy Garoppolo. Because again, I covered Jimmy Garoppolo, the San Francisco 49ers. And if you look at how GM John Lynch built up his team with Martin Mayhew there, they went after and got Laken Tomlinson, right? Laken Tomlinson was a former first-round pick with Martin Mayhew with the Detroit Lions at interior guard. They also went ahead and got Trent Williams, silverback, right? And then they also drafted right tackle Mike McGlinchey back in 2018, the same draft that Colton Miller came out of, and he was drafted number 15. So again, in order to have that analysis that I just provided, you have to know the landscape of the other 31 other NFL teams. Otherwise, you're just throwing darts at the board, hoping something hits. And that's not how I like to do business. I like to keep it filtered, straight with factual information, but then provide an analysis that really makes sense from all parties involved. So,
yeah, I like where you have Peter Skoronski because I like to kick him inside to that guard. You brought back Jermaine Illuminor. I think he can be serviceable at the right tackle. He's not probably the long-term answer, but he's a serviceable starter. I think as the season went on, outside of the penalties, I thought he improved a little bit. He struggled at the beginning of the season, but moving him inside to inside the guard, Peter Skronce, I'm talking about immediate upgrade over an Alex Bars. By far, you're probably getting a future All-Pro. That's where I had him graded, especially at the guard position. But at that 7 spot, everybody talks about Devon Witherspoon. They talk about Christian Gonzalez there at 7. For me personally, that's a bit rich for this cornerback class. You look at Christian Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon, both of them having a year of solid production. It's really 1 year. Both of them, Christian Gonzalez transferring over to Oregon. To me at 7, that's a little bit too rich. And if your eyes aren't set on a quarterback prospect, I think Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are off my board because you have a Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know that you trade up for those top 2-tier guys. If you have Jimmy on the roster, if you're going to trade up, it's probably for an Anthony Richardson if they're actually interested.
Yeah.
But if you're sitting there at 7, are you trading back what you were just alluding to?
Yeah, and I think and I would say I'm 90% confident, 95% confident they're not going to make a pick at 7. They're going to trade back. So on April 15th, watch people piggyback on that analysis, but no, I think they're going to trade back. I think they're going to trade back into that cluster I talked about on Raider Nation Radio back on, and I spoke about this on January 11th and January 19th when the season wasn't even over yet. Because that's, I mean, I've been running college game grades just as much as I run NFL game grades because I don't have enough time to play catch up when it's off season because that's a lot of film. So when you dedicate that much film study, you really have to, you're going to pick up little things. And so I think based on how I see the draft unfolding, I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to draft at that 10 to 18 range, depending on who wants to tango with them, because it takes 2 to tango. But at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. They're going to trade out at number 7 when it's all said and done, and trade down.
And make sure to check out the latest Beast Rider live. I think it was. Did you go live yesterday? I think.
Yeah. I went live every single day this week. I don't know how I did it.
The guy is putting in work, so make sure you go to his channel and subscribe to his channel. But when we were on the live, we talked about like the smoke screens that's happening around this time of year, right before the draft. There's so many people are trying to connect the dots with the Raiders, with all the quarterbacks, all these prospects. And on this channel, we talked about a particular prospect, Anthony Richardson. And we love his high ceiling. We feel like if the Raiders believe in, that quarterback position in this draft, and if we can get a guy like Anthony Richardson, then you just combined a top 5 head coach, a top 5 offensive-minded coach with a guy like Anthony Richardson in a division with Patrick Mahomes. You could see how Raider Nation could get excited with that move. But, I know you have your thoughts, and let the chat, because they weren't there, but let them know about your thoughts on Anthony Richardson.
I mean, I think he's a little bit overhyped, right? When I run the film, he can't throw. He's not accurate. He doesn't throw on the proper shoulder. These are things in NFL traits that you look for. You turn on ESPN. Dan Orlovsky, I was at the gym watching Dan Orlovsky from the gym on ESPN, and he was talking how Anthony Richardson's the only quarterback who had 2 touchdown passes and 22 of over 50 air yards or something like that, right? Something crazy like that. Right. I said, okay, that's a cool story. That's a cool stat. Cool story, bro. But at the end of the day, does he throw on the proper shoulder? Does he throw to the receiver in stride? I can guarantee you Davante Adams wouldn't want a quarterback that threw behind him all the time, right? Where he had to adjust to make a play on the football. Why? Because Davante Adams is more of a threat when the ball's in his hands where he can make moves on moves, right? Mm-hmm. He can hit that hit stick and he can just do whatever he wants. So at the end of the day, I think that Anthony Richardson wouldn't be a good fit. Now, he is intriguing. He does have NFL traits that you look for, right? He's strong, he's calm, he's cool in the pocket, he's collected. But at the end of the day, for me, if I'm looking at it from a quarterback standpoint, I do like Anthony Richardson, so I wouldn't mind if they drafted him. I just wouldn't draft him at number 7. I wouldn't draft him inside the top 10. In fact, some NFL execs that I spoke with don't even view him as a top 15 pick. Right?
Wow. Is he someone who could fall to the back end of round 1?
Everything around this time is clickbait. Right? Everything is clickbait. And that's why we're talking, and that's why we should talk about it. And that's why people that follow me on my channel, they know I keep it 100, right? But I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson can't be a Hall of Fame quarterback, because let's be honest, I'll be 100% honest with it. Do I get everything right? No. And to be honest with you, when it comes to the quarterback position, I am the worst. Like, I should say worst, but I'm not the best talent evaluator. So what does that go to show you? Probably everything that I'm saying right now is probably BS. It's probably the opposite's going to happen. But then I cross-check it with other NFL executives, right, in my circle. They're saying, hey, you're not wrong. I mean, it's a smoke screen that he is valued at any given draft. Would you actually, in any given draft, any other given draft, would you actually view Anthony Richardson as a top 3 quarterback, top 4 quarterback in the NFL? I mean, look at next year's draft. Where would he place in next year's draft? He wouldn't even be, he wouldn't be top 1. He wouldn't be top 2, right?
I do think that he should have stayed a year. He's the classic boomer bust pick. You look at him, you see the potential, but obviously if it doesn't work out, it could be bad. And you know what? It might be just the Al Davis in me. You know what I mean? It's just growing up Raider fan. We've always talked about potential, the fastest guy, the biggest, the strongest. But I see how that doesn't work out, because at the end of the day, it's about what they put out in the film room, their production, and what they've done in college before anything. You know what I mean? And then the icing on the cake is obviously what they do in the combine. But even it sounds like, and I think Ray agrees with this as well, it sounds like the combine is not really going to make or break what you think about the draft prospects coming up.
Yeah, the combine didn't change anything for me. And Beast, I'm going to be honest, I'm an AR guy, and I'll kind of say why. What you were talking about isn't wrong. I wouldn't say you're wrong. Is he there as a prospect? Absolutely not. He has 13 career college games. He's 20 years old. I mean, he's not even at the legal drinking age at the time of the draft. But what he's shown in a sample size of 13 games, over the course of the last 5 to 7 games, he threw 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And while those are statistics, I would say over the course of the season, he improved. Now, his short accuracy is bad. The footwork needs improvement. The good thing about Anthony Richardson for the Raiders is that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the starter for 2 years. And if you're telling me you got Anthony Richardson and can sit in this scheme for 2 years and develop under Josh McDaniels, which you allude to as a top 5 head coach, in your opinion, when you look at the upside of Anthony, it's remarkable, because what he has is the things that you can't coach. And that's when the pocket breaks down. He has the ability to keep his eyes downfield. Now, whether he hits consistently accurate, that's another debate. But when the pocket breaks down, he has that ability to keep his eyes downfield, stay upright, and he is a natural thrower of the football. He's not a tuck and run first. He's not a one read and go. He does like to sit back there and go through his progressions. I would say in Josh McDaniels' offensive scheme, outside of the numbers, we've seen it last season a lot. We've seen the scissors concept. We've seen dagger. We've seen the deep post, and these are all things Anthony Richardson is actually graded high as in his evaluation as a quarterback prospect. So outside of the numbers, remarkably, actually pretty good high percentage throws, daggers, scissors. These are things and concepts that Josh McDaniels like, which is why I think when you look back last season, Dave Ziegler, Champ Kelly went to the Texas and Florida game. They've probably spent more time with Anthony Richardson than any quarterback prospect leading up to the draft. Now, is that smoke? Maybe. But I would say that there might be some interest there.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that game, because GM Dave Ziegler told me he was going to that game. But let's not leave out Osiris Torrance. Now that we're talking Florida products,
or I think did Hendon Hooker play? I think Hendon Hooker played that game. So
and Hendon Hooker, that's the guy who I think they're going to trade back up in the tail end of the first. So I'm spilling the beans here. So no, not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying, I'm just speaking out loud. No one told me anything. But I mean, look. I like Anthony Richardson. I'm not saying this guy, and everything that you said, Raider Ray, is on point. Like, I'm not saying you're not on point, right? Like, everything, and that's the beauty of this whole thing, right? Like, it's good to be, obviously I'm more right than wrong, but then I get things wrong. This one I'll probably get wrong, and you'd probably get it right. So at the end of the day, it's one of those things where we just don't know, and it's a huge risk. But when you look back at the analytics, how many quarterbacks have we said this every single draft that they're going to have? Jamarcus Russell. I mean, dang, this guy is going to be the next. Oh, come on, man. Like, it's like, where do we draw the line and say, why every year do we inflate these quarterbacks when there's really nothing to inflate? And I'm not saying that's with Anthony Richardson, because I do see the NFL traits. He's young, but the same thing was applied back in 2021 with Trey Lance, right? Even though he came out not a Power 5 conference, but with the 49ers, I mean, I was there. Same thing applied. And it's like, now what's happening with Trey Lance? He's injured, but I'm just saying, like, an executive went on with me on my show, and we talked about Trey Lance. During this time back in 2021, the executives that we all spoke with said he was a year away from being away. And if the executives that I spoke with when it comes to Anthony Richardson, let's just say this: some of the people, some of the scouts feel that that's kind of the same trend of where it's headed.
Do you think he has a better floor than Trey Lance based off of his ability with his legs?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like 700 yards, and he could come in year one if he was at, say, Jimmy goes down. Yeah. You could go into that week or 2 weeks that he's injured and maybe find some success based off of the running ability, you know, of this offense, the power gap scheme, Josh Jacobs. You know, he has a plethora of weapons and his ability to create with his legs. Do you think his floor is a lot better than what Trey's is?
Absolutely. I think so. And that's nothing to take away from Trey. I liked Trey coming
Trey
out. But I just think
2 years old too. Still.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Anthony Richardson is just a different he's on a different level. Like, it's just, for me to draft this guy in the top 10, you're really setting your franchise back, because if you want to take the risk reward game, that's moving all your chips to the table, leaving no chips behind for the next hand. So again, that you have to hit. Everyone says, oh, you know, the nation, I don't know about you guys, but they leave comments. Oh, the Raiders have to hit on this draft class. They have to hit on this draft class. Well, if you know that, then you want to minimize the risk as much as possible, but you also have to take risks. So where's that fine line where we have Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So either way, we can sit the guy, or do you want to wait till next year because we have another bleak season? Then we can get the quarterback that we actually want, who is a better fit for our system, instead of basing it based on NFL traits that we look for that quarterback.
If he's sitting there at 7, do you think the Raiders are considering potentially grabbing Anthony at all?
No, I think it's a huge smokescreen. And I talked about that on my live stream. I think they're trying to drive up the interest for Anthony Richardson, because that scenario is going to play out. That scenario, based on my mock draft, currently is going to play out where Jalen Carter and Anthony Richardson are both on the board. They're going to drive up the interest for both, see what else is out there. Because if the Seattle Seahawks don't take, and GM John Schneider doesn't take Jalen Carter at 5 because they have Draymond Jones there and Jaron Reed, they obviously need a nose tackle. But I don't think you draft Jalen Carter to be a 2-gap nose tackle in that 34 base. So again, when you look at that dynamics of what they want to do, they usually like Big 12 products, and that usually comes out to Texas Tech, which brings me to Tyree Wilson. They like those long arm guys. They did it with Bruce Irvin out of West Virginia many years ago. And then they also drafted out of Texas Tech, if you want to connect the dots, and Jordan Brooks in the first round. So they like those Big 12 Russell Okung guys who come out of that conference, Earl Thomas. The list goes on and on and on. So again, when you look at that and how that draft unfolds, I think both guys will be available, and I think they're going to drive up the interest to stockpile more picks that we alluded to earlier.
And I don't know. I like Tyree Wilson. I do. I like his game film. But do you think Jalen Carter is completely off the board for the Raiders?
I talked about this too, and when Vic Tafur from The Athletic, he put out a report saying that he was off the board or they weren't interested in him, whatever the wordage is. I don't think that he's all wrong. I mean, there's people calling him a clown and stuff, and I think that, look, Vic wouldn't be with the Raiders as a beat writer and a very credible source if he didn't know his stuff, or he didn't have strong sources to go out and say that, because your credibility is on the line.
Right.
So when he came in for a pre-draft visit just down the street from my house, which is like half a mile from here, and Jalen Carter came in for a pre-draft visit, people were throwing shade. Well, Vinny was right, because he said, despite reports, he's coming in for a pre-draft visit. So Vinny Bonsignore is right. At the end of the day, Vic could also be right, because if he's sitting there at 7 and they decide to trade back, then you're hiding your interest, because you're not saying that, hey, we took him off his board. You wouldn't know the difference because we traded back and stockpiled more picks. And in GM Dave Ziegler's mind, if we were to talk to him, why'd you trade back? Oh, we saw value in trading back, still getting the cluster of players that we wanted, and stockpiling more picks. So you wouldn't know the answer as to whether or not they wanted Jalen Carter or not. You're hiding your interest. You see where that goes with reverse psychology. So all this plays a role in it. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's fair to just call out Vic saying he's wrong in his analysis, because if they're on the board at 7 and they decide to trade back, well, you can't say that Vic was wrong.
Right. No, yeah. Go ahead. Oh, okay. So Yeah, we've been talking about it. I think, last season we've seen it with Dave Ziegler. He was extremely aggressive in free agency. The Chandler Jones trading for Devontae Adams. He was extremely aggressive.
Mhm.
And we've seen this approach in this free agency of just really getting depth players. I mean, you have a lot of holes on the roster, so they go out, they get Spillane and Epps, and they just go get depth pieces to add to this roster.
Mhm.
Do you see Dave Ziegler being extremely aggressive, much like he was in free agency last year, just switched up into the draft this year, moving
Yeah.
up, moving down, trading for players?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to cut you off there. Yeah, I think
No, you're good.
2 to 3 trades. Obviously, I think they're going to end up with 2 first-round picks when it's all said and done. So I'll be
Wow.
talking to 2 of those guys right after they get drafted. Write that down on April 15th, 2023. In that 28 to 32 range. I really do. I think if they find a quarterback that they feel that they're not going to have a shot at in the second round when they're on the clock, they're going to move up in the tail end of the first to go ahead and maneuver those 12 draft picks how they see fit. When it comes to solidifying needs, I think on day 2 is where you're really going to find those day 2, day 3 picks where you might see Dave Ziegler leverage 2 fourth-round picks to move up in the third, and then leverage two third-round picks to move up in the tail end of the second. So you can end up with 2 1s, 3 2s, and then also stockpile more picks for 2024. I think that's what you should go. So in the first, I would say the first 2-3 rounds, I think you'll come out with possibly five of those picks, and then leverage the future draft capital in the following year's draft.
Man, hey man, you got this all figured out, yo. he has this figured out. He has, man. Hey, you know what it is too, and I'm gonna pivot from the draft because obviously we could talk about a lot about the draft, and make sure to check out Beast Rider because this guy breaks it down every day. He went live pretty much every day this week, so make sure to check him out. Let's pivot to one of the big stories this week with Josh Jacobs and how it seems like he's probably not going to be showing up to any of these offseason workouts. He hasn't officially signed the franchise tag. Do you see Josh Jacobs coming back to the Raiders?
Oh man, so this is one of those, right? Like I'm biased because I'm me and Josh, we get along really well, right? So I feel a certain way toward Josh, right? And I said it, in training camp, I said he's going to outplay his contract. He might outplay his way in Las Vegas. I said he's going to be an MVP. I literally said he was going to be an MVP candidate. So like, no one put that out there. I did, straight from Raiders headquarters, and I knew because I knew what Coach McDaniels. I knew how he's going to use him. Like I just saw it. I just saw him watching practice. So that's why I went out and said it, because I was like, oh, no one's putting this out there. I'm going to put it out there. So when it comes to Josh Jacobs, look, he had the year that he had. And Pharaoh, I mean, I guess we can somewhat agree or disagree on it, but 15 million APY is what I valued him at. And I think he deserves that in a front-loaded deal. I mean, you're talking about not being the highest paid running back. I mean, Christian McCaffrey gets that, I believe, at 16 million or something like that. So it's only 1 million off. But at the end of the day, it's like, how can you imagine life without Josh Jacobs? You remove Josh Jacobs from that offense and you can call it a plug and play, but the production isn't going to match up with the plug and play production, right? Like if you removed me from the show, or if you removed Farrah from the show, if you removed Ray or Ray from the show and you just had someone else come in, even though they are a content creator, the value of that content could be crappy. Right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. No, yeah.
So how would that mirror? So that if we're just talking in layman terms, how would that mirror on a football team with 11 guys on the football team, right? Because they're used to blocking for Josh Jacobs. They know what they're getting with Josh Jacobs. So if they're supposed to reach block or combo reach block on hitting the second level, but they know that Josh Jacobs can hit that second level backer, so they're just climbing up to the third level, you already know what you're getting. So there's chemistry there, right? If we just have a new guy on the show right now and we're just playing interchangeable parts, now it's going to have a huge effect on that. So getting back to your question, is he going to be with the Las Vegas Raiders? I don't think they're going to trade him. I don't think they're going to trade him. I think he's ultimately going to sign that franchise tag, and then ultimately kind of seek a long-term deal, because Dave Ziegler knows how important he is. And at the end of the day, I mean, as much as I love Zeus White, I love him, right? Love Zeus White. Got to know him very well. Very, very good guy on and off the football field. I'm just not sure of what we have in Zeus White because there's just not a good sample size to pull from. So is that fair to Jimmy Garoppolo because he needs a running game if he's a game manager to pull away the thing that makes your game managing offense go, and then having to sit there and watch and say, oh, well, Jim Garoppolo sucks. Well, how can you say that? Because he didn't have Josh Jacobs. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And okay, so before I get into this, I just want to ask you, if the Raiders were to trade Josh Jacobs, what do you think kind of value they would get for him?
Man, good question. Well,
yeah, that's a loaded question in a way, because I mean, I think GMs tend to value certain players based on the scheme fit. So if you're looking at an AFC North team like the Baltimore Ravens or Pittsburgh Steelers, who they have Najee Harris there, but I'm just speaking out loud. If they wanted to go ahead and make a trade or something like that, then yeah, because you're a power-based run scheme or your zone blocking scheme that likes to run the football first. Obviously the Philadelphia Eagles could be one. I mean, they lost a lot of running backs there. But I think the value for a Josh Jacobs, man, late first, possibly maybe two. Here's the funny thing about this. Josh Jacobs is so young. So even though those tread on his tires, he's very young. So he can afford to get hurt and still bounce back in today's NFL. So even though it's not a luxury position, age does play a role, right? So if you're looking at it from a GM perspective, if it was me, I would value Josh Jacobs at a late first round pick.
So yeah, and my take with Josh Jacobs is like, and I've come on here and I've said this before, but I love Josh Jacobs. I really like him. I said previous to last year, switching this power gap scheme just based off of how Josh McDaniels loves to run his concepts. I said Josh is going to have the best season of his career. And signing Josh Jacobs to a long-term deal, you said 15 API. Is that necessarily beneficial for the Raiders, who gave that $15 million to Hunter Renfrow? They go and signed Devontae Adams to a big-time contract. And in this offense, with it being so, scheme-driven, you're not going to get the 1,600-yard production that Josh Jacobs gave you. Mm-hmm. But if you could get a late first round, like you were just alluding to, if you can go out there and get a second-round draft pick, I'm a film guy, you're a film guy. Mm-hmm. What about getting a guy like a Roschon Johnson, who backed up Bijan? Could you get similar production, maybe 1,200 yards, 1,100 yards, and to be able to still move this football with Jimmy Garoppolo and not have to subject so much money to the offensive side of the football? Being said that, I love Josh Jacobs. I think he deserves all that money, but is that right for the Raiders?
I guess it's at this point, it's almost how you value Josh Jacobs. Forget the position of running back. I mean, he put up 2,053 scrimmage yards that led the NFL. So that's rushing and receiving combined. For me, knowing how Jimmy Garoppolo was used in San Francisco, you're going to need that type of back. And you're going to need that back that can kind of be the security blanket coming out of the flats. If you're to give Jimmy Garoppolo the best chance to win, you have to keep Josh Jacobs on the roster. You cannot afford to roll with a rookie. You cannot not afford to roll with the unknown. At the end of the day, it's almost like I said, I'm a little biased. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not, because I do feel a certain way toward Josh Jacobs. I feel like he deserves every penny that he gets. And although the running back position is not as highly valued, I think that mindset should, if you run the grades and if you understand football and how schematics work, that goes out the window once they sign Jimmy Garoppolo, because he's a game manager. Now, if you went after a guy like Aaron Rodgers, then yeah, sure, right? But they don't have Aaron Rodgers. They have Jimmy Garoppolo. So you're going to have to give Jimmy Garoppolo every chance to win. Otherwise, you're going to look at this and say, and I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo would sign knowing that he wouldn't have Josh Jacobs as his running back. Let's put it that way. Right? I that's just my opinion.
If it was offered for a late first, do you think Dave Z pulls the trigger on that? I mean, there's got to be a real conversation, right? Because
I'm sure conversations already took place, right? Because he didn't sign it. So it's just like, okay, then what do you want? Yeah, no. Gosh. But see, that's the thing. If Josh Jacobs wants to be the highest paid running back, I know it's only 1 million difference, but it's like, okay, man, like, even though it's 1 million, it's like, okay, at what point do we have to draw the line, right? Like from a GM perspective. Right. So I don't think he should be the highest paid. So I just don't know what kind of financial conversations are being discussed behind closed doors. But I will say this. I will say, if he wants to be the highest paid running back, I think it'd be hard not to entertain a late round 1 pick.
Yeah, that's
because then you can get Bijan Robinson, right? You can. What if you wanted to go and the Detroit Lions want him, right? That's how I have him in my mock draft right now. What if you wanted to go ahead and move ahead of the Detroit Lions, but still getting that cluster, moving back from 7 to whatever, and then leverage that second first-round pick you just got for Josh Jacobs for another position on the defense side of the football? So now you get one on both sides of the football at the end of day one.
Yeah, it just makes, if you're in a rebuild, it just kind of makes sense, and it's unfortunate for Josh because I would love to see Josh be a Raider long-term, right?
Yeah.
But when you're building this thing, and if you're going to want to do it the right way, $15 million a year. I mean, we've seen Damian Harris, we've seen Ramondre Stevenson out in New England. We've seen his ability to go out and find these guys. Now, Zamir White, do I think he's a long-term Josh Jacobs replacement? Probably not. And that's no shot at him. I just that's a big shoe to fill. But if you can go get a Bijan, if you can go get Roschon Johnson, who backed up Bijan, we've seen those situations work out before. I don't know. I think the Raiders have a lot to sit down, and I think that they're going to get offers and get some calls come draft night. But if you're Dave Z, let's kind of pivot back to the draft. If you're Dave Z, who are you taking in the draft with the first pick?
I'm moving down into that cluster and getting Peter Skoronski, and it goes against conventional wisdom, because no one's talking about Peter Skoronski except for me. No one on the beat, none on the national media, and there's a reason for that, right? Smokescreen, right? They're hiding their interest. He's not even in for a pre-draft visit. So what does that tell you? But yet Carmen Bracillo was his offensive line, who's the offensive line coach, was working him out as pro day. Like you don't send the position coach to the pro day.
Ooh, hey, you heard that right there. That's
in the top 30 visits last year. The only top 30 visit that they ended up taking was Thayer Mumford, and that was a round draft pick. So just be careful, everybody, with the top 30 visits.
Yeah, those top 30 visits don't mean much.
No.
I'm joking. They mean something, but it's just how you want to use them. So I think Peter Skoronski is their target. No one has told me that. I'm just connecting the dots here, and based on my analytics and how I see these GMs playing it, including Jay Ziegler, I think Peter Skoronski is going to be the play. They're going to plug him at right guard or left guard. It doesn't matter because Dylan Parham played right guard in college, so he can. People aren't talking about that, right? People are not talking about potentially moving parts here. Dylan Parham moves back to his natural right guard position, and Peter Skoronski fills in on the left side because he played blindside left tackle for the better half of the last 3 years. So now you talk about Colton Miller, Peter Skoronski, Andre James, Dylan Parham, and then whoever's at right tackle, Jermaine Lenore, right? I mean, if you talk about an offensive line giving Jimmy Garoppolo every chance to win, that right there, and then giving Josh Jacobs, or if let's say Josh Jacobs is not there, you're still gonna need a stable offensive line. The line will look a lot worse without Josh Jacobs there than with a rookie running back. So you better solidify the offensive line up front.
And even when Jimmy G was healthy, he hasn't had a season where he's thrown over 500 passing attempts. I think people forget that. So this is going to be a very, very run-heavy offense. And look, if Josh Jacobs signs that franchise tag, he's going to get used a lot like he did last year. That's just the fact of the matter. So, no, I like that take. I don't know necessarily if the Raiders are going to go offensive line round one. I love the take, just because it's different from everything that we're seeing, right? I've seen enough of the Devon Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez at 7. I've seen that a million times. It's nice to get a fresh take. But being a film guy, I like looking at those. I find so much value rounds 2, 3, 4. And even in the 5th round, you can still find really good football players. What are maybe some guys that you're looking at later in the draft that the Raiders could target, and kind of fill us in on that?
Yeah, I know Dante Steele's a good friend of mine who I covered at the East-West Shrine Bowl here in Vegas. Raiders really like him. So he's a guy that I really liked as well. Got to know him very well, became really good friends with him out of West Virginia. So don't sleep on Dante Stills. Don't sleep on guys like Trey Dean, the Florida free safety. Got to know him at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Don't sleep on... Now watch everyone. I always say, let me write this down because people piggyback on my analysis and then they pass it off as their own. But don't sleep on. It's funny because it's whatever. But it's really,
it's the world we live in. That's
it makes them look like
fired right there.
For real, shots fired, and they're getting called out for it. They already been called out behind closed doors. So just wait till it happens. Jose Ramirez, another guy, another good friend of mine, another East-West Shrine Bowl prospect, played with Max Crosby. Another good friend of mine, talked to his coaches. He's a good fit for the Raider way. All these guys are good cultural team fits, and also bring that on-field production coming from the schools that they came from, whether it be Eastern Michigan, whether it be Florida, whether it be West Virginia. So look for those guys. Also for Bay Area, from the Bay Area, my good friend Nehemiah Shelton. Nehemiah Shelton was a guy who was on my live stream. We talked about it. He was also looked at. And the Atlanta Falcons, who coached him up, named him the most improved player throughout camp. So what does that tell you about Nehemiah Shelton? Well, he didn't run the fastest 40 time because he's dealing with a hamstring injury. So people can't turn to his 40 at his pro day and say, hey, look, he had a bad 40 because he was dealing with an injury that he didn't want to disclose. But I found out from my sources that was the reason why. So those are people that players that I really like that they can get in probably day 2, day 3, but definitely not day 1.
Wow. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? I want to ask because there were some early rumors, especially when Darren Waller got traded. There were some rumors about Hunter Renfrow possibly getting traded as well. And I feel like I know what you're going to say just based off what you kind of said with Jimmy G. But do you foresee maybe some draft? Because I know just based off what you're saying, there's going to be some trades happening in this draft.
Absolutely.
But do you see some players being included, specifically maybe a Hunter Renfrow possibly to maybe get to a certain spot, to get to, to get a player, to move up to maybe get to CJ Stroud if he for somehow, some way drops to number 3 or 4 or 5, or drops, and like you just said, you said that you foresee Dave Z moving up and down this draft board with the 12 picks.
Correct.
Does he include a player like maybe Hunter Renfrow?
I mean, that's always on the table, right? And Vinny already posted it up and said, no one's untouchable, but something that kind of goes common sense, right? If the offer was too good to pass up and they saw value in a younger player where they could move on from Hunter Renfrow while still using that extra money to kind of sign Josh Jacobs to a long-term extension, why not go that route? Right. And I think that's kind of the dynamic we're talking about, because one, durability comes into play too. Right. So you talk about the law of diminishing returns. At what point do you say, hey, look, we know what we had in Hunter Renfrow. We gave him top 5 slot money. But at the end of the day, it's what have you done for me lately in the NFL? And so if we can find value in not only a slot guy, but maybe a return guy in the kicking game, because Coach McDaniels loves those guys that can be multi-versatile and not being a one-trick pony. Why not go after one of these prospects that you're targeting? And I know for a fact they're targeting some of those slot returner guys. So, yeah, would I be surprised? Absolutely not.
And you got Jakobi Meyers, and we know he's played outside, but he's found a home also significantly on the inside. So you have Hunter Renfrow for $15 million, a 5th-round draft pick. Why not at least take an offer? He, like you alluded to, what have you done for me lately? Last season, it wasn't. I mean,
he was hurt
here and there, but he was hurt. You know. And so that doesn't help Hunter's stock. And let's be honest, his size, it's going to catch up. His size, he has elite route running ability, and it's really fun to watch. But at some point, that size is going to be a factor, especially those contested balls that Josh McDaniels is going to ask him to run across the middle of the field. I think that's why he goes out and gets a big slot receiver like a Jakobi Meyers. I don't know. It just kind of feels like Hunter might be a guy that might be on the outs.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's hard to gauge because it is Hunter Renfrow and they just signed him that big money contract. But again, they just did it to Darren Waller, and now he's not there. So what does that tell you? I mean, that has to say something, right? I mean, the proof is in the pudding already. So you can't say that they're not listening to offers.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I think, hey, Ray, you made a good point about him. Every time I see Hunter Renfrow play and he gets hit, I'm always holding my breath like, ooh, because he's not the biggest guy. But obviously, I think him not playing last year, and then even when he was in there, he wasn't his usual self. And even when we heard Hunter Renfrow sit down in an interview, when he talked about his career up until that point, he talked about the struggle he had his first couple of years where he was doing exactly how the coach wanted it. Coach wanted him to do it. And with McDaniels, it seems like he has his way and he wants to do it his way. I don't know. Maybe you could speak to this. Do you see this? Does McDaniels have that room where he allows players to be creative, like the receivers to kind of do their own thing?
With Davante Adams, yes, he has a green light. He has what's called the two-way go, so he can do whatever. He uses a hop stick off the line of scrimmage, and he can have a two-way go however he sees fit. So, when people talk about does Coach McDaniels give you the freedom? Yes, but you have to have the respect of the other team that you're facing to know that, hey, I'm not going to be a robot, right? But you have to find the open space there. So it's a catch-22. I think if you play competitive sports and you're good enough, you're going to have a two-way go, right? You're going to have that option. But if you're one of those guys who are learning the offense, or you're known to stick to a plan and just do that, like a Jacoby Myers, right? I don't think he has the freedom to do whatever hell he wants outside of finding the soft spots in zone coverage underneath. I think it's more of, hey, look, this is the route, run the freaking route.
Yeah. I think he wants things more done his way.
Yeah.
For sure, man. But hey, man, Beast Rider, we appreciate you coming on.
100%.
We said 10 to 15 minutes. This guy comes in and stays here for almost pretty much an hour.
Crushes an hour.
Man, kills it, man. And he can go for another hour if he wanted to, but we want to be respectful of his time. And hey, make sure to check him out. You see it on the screen. Beast Rider. You can find him on YouTube. You can find him on Twitter, Instagram. Make sure you follow him. Hit the like button, subscribe, and all that good stuff. But this is off topic. But are you watching any NBA teams today's first round of playoffs? You got anybody?
Well, I have to go to church in a little bit. I go to the same church as Derek Carr goes, so church LB.
Oh, nice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So every Saturday we go over there. So that's at 5. So after 5 o'clock, probably. The Warrior. I'll be honest with you. I haven't been keeping up with NBA basketball at all. So I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, I know who's good. I don't like horrible, dude. So
hey, we understand. We see the amount of work that you put in right now with this football.
But the Warriors, obviously the Warriors. I'm from the Bay Area, right? Born and raised in San Jose. So obviously huge Warriors fan out here. But are the Warriors playing today?
They're playing. Yeah, they're playing first. It's going to be the first game of the first round. And it's they're playing against the Kings. So it's going to be a California series with Sacramento versus the Warriors. And Sacramento, the Kings have been pretty good this year, which is surprising because they've been bad for a long time. They, for me, they haven't been good since the Lakers and Kings rivalry. If you guys, I don't know if anybody in the chat will remember those.
Chris Webber, Mike Bibby, Peja Stojakovic,
Doug Christie,
Bobby Jackson.
Yeah.
Bro, I know. See, I know basketball. I just say I haven't been keeping it up over the last 2 years. I'm horrible.
No, I'm not even in the realm of this conversation. I don't follow basketball at all. I'm more of like mixed martial arts. There's a big fight tonight. Max Holloway's fighting tonight, so I'm gonna be tuning into that. So
is that UFC?
Yep.
Yeah.
See, I know nothing about UFC. Like, I'm here in Vegas and I know nothing about UFC.
Oh man, you got to get out there and experience it.
No, I need to get into it myself.
Yeah, it's fun.
But Beast Rider, do you want to let the nation know, everybody in the chat, whoever's watching, like any last thoughts that you want to let them know?
No, man, just like it's, just kind of like your vibe, right? Like you guys can follow me on YouTube. It's right here posted, YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram at Beast Rider. We do a lot of cool giveaways. It's something that I started with the 49ers is I give back because the bigger I grow, the bigger we grow as a family. I call you guys family, so once you subscribe, once you follow me, you're in. And then we run weekly giveaways. So it could be anything as far as a Raiders mini helmet. It could be Raider Nation rally towels. It could be tickets to the game, right? Mm-hmm. Good tickets to the game, not nosebleeds. I'm talking really good tickets. That's kind of the vision as we continue to grow. And we've been doing this ever since I started covering the Raiders and even covering the Niners, is because I want to give that vibe back, because I always talk about, people being put on a pedestal. Like, I don't want people to feel like I'm on a pedestal because I'm a beat writer or I'm better than you, or because it's not even about that. It's more about the community engagement that you can bring that's authentic and where it's really being reciprocated, right? And we talk about this, Farrell, right? Talk about it being learning, something that we can all learn from, right? I learned from you guys just as much as you learn from me. So don't get it twisted and think that you guys don't bring value to the table, especially the people in the chat, right? So it's one of those things where, like I said, it's something that I truly believe in. And that's how I kind of got big with the Niners. It's not doing the giveaways, but just bringing that authentic engagement. I was that guy, even though I was a beat writer. Dude, get this. Before every game, I was tailgating, not drinking, obviously, because that's kind of unprofessional. But I was tailgating, getting to know the Niner fans in the area, because, they make me who I am. And so, like, I run giveaways for people who follow me. I'll do a live stream in the parking lot, and I'm like, hey, first person that follows me gets 2 tickets to today's game. Boom, down. So that type of vibe, I try to recreate here with the nation. because I think there's so much hatred between different fan bases and even within their own fan base that, there's enough of that we don't need that. And that's just kind of like the vibe I hope to bring off. So yeah, everyone's welcome. Doesn't matter what fan you come from or what city you root for. It's all one family here in the Dark Side of Beast Rider. So that's just what I want to push.
Hey, well, I can only say, for me and Farrell, we appreciate you coming on. If you want to stick around behind, we're going to wrap up this show, and we can meet you backstage. If not, if you have to go, that's completely fine. But Raider Nation, man, make sure you're subscribed to Beast Rider. This was a great show, great conversation. Make sure you're subscribed to Farrell NFL and Real Raider Ray.
Hit that like button.
Hit that like button. Everybody that's in the chat, make sure you run up the like button. It shoots this video up the algorithm. It's a very, very real thing. And we appreciate you guys taking the time out of your Saturday to join us. So, Raider Nation, you know how we do it. You know how we end the show. As always.